and Pharmaceuticals in association with Higher Secondary Principals Forum.
Hello everyone. In the previous chapter, we have studied a lot of cultural developments which took place in India during the 6th century BCE. We saw that there were growth of new cities. There was a development in the coinage. Mahajanapada were formed, and apart from these two, we also kind of studied of two diverse system of thoughts which were called as Buddhism and Jainism during the later period. So now let us continue in this topic of cultural developments which took place during this period, and these cultural developments were in the form of Buddhism, Jainism, and later on in the form of Puranic Hinduism. Before I go to the topic, I would like to tell you that there were a lot of philosophers, lot of teachers who were actually trying to put forth their philosophy which was understood by them, and this would happen by debates and by discussion. So there were philosophers, there were travelers who traveled from one place to the other, telling the people, teaching the people, or preaching what they called or what they felt was philosophy of life. And these teachers, wherever they went to these villages or when they went to these different places, they would halt or they would start initiating the debates on philosophies in a hut which was called as Kutagrashala. Now the meaning of the word Kutagrashala means a hut with a pointed roof. Here you have on the screen a hut which has a pointed roof, and this was a very typical scene in the Indian villages during the ancient times. So this Kutagrashala was a hub where discussions took place, where mendicants came, they spoke, they debated, and that is how new system of thoughts were born. So before I go to the topic of Buddhism, okay, I would like to tell you what exactly are the sources of Buddhism. When Gautam Buddha lived, okay, when he was living, during his lifetime he preached, and when he preached, let me tell you that his preachings were not recorded or not documented by anybody, and that is one of the reasons why his teachings were left unrecorded during his lifetime. But later on, after he passed away in Kushinagar, okay, that is much later on, all his teachings were compiled at a council of elders, and that happened in a place called Vesali in Bihar. Now these compilations were called as Tipitaka. If you actually go to see the meaning of the word Tipitaka, it means three baskets. And what were these three baskets or three sections of his preaching or teaching? The first one was called as Vinaya Pitaka. Vinaya Pitaka had all the rules and regulations which had to be followed by the people who joined the Sangha. Now, the second one was Abhidhamma Pitaka, which had teachings or preachings of Gautam Buddha which are related to philosophical matters, his philosophy of life. And the last one was Sutta Pitaka, which contains his actual teachings. Now these words, if you see Sutta Pitaka or Abhidham Pitaka, Vinaya Pitaka, they are actually they were compiled into three various sections. Now, as Buddhism went far and wide, it traveled far east, it went to Sri Lanka and many more countries. There also some regional texts containing the histories of Buddhism were coined or were made, okay, and these texts were in two sections once again. In Sri Lanka you have Buddhist texts which contain regional histories, and these regional histories are called as Deepavansha and Mahavansha. Deepavansha means chronicle of the island, okay, and Mahavansha means the great chronicle. Later on we also have lot of texts which were collected by Chinese travelers who came in search of this Buddhist philosophy to India, and there were two people, they were called, their names are Fa Zian and Xuanzang. They came to India, they remained here, they collected lot many Buddhist texts. These also provide us very important information about the Buddhist philosophy. Later on, the Buddhist manuscripts were accumulated, they were kept, they were preserved for many centuries in various monasteries in India and outside India also, and translations took place. Translations in Pali, translations in Sanskrit, and translations in Chinese. So you find a list of sources which we use to study the Buddhist philosophy, or what we call as Buddhism. So here you have pictures of various canons of Gautam Buddha's philosophy. Okay, they are in form of some are in the form of paper. 18th century texts are in the form of paper. Then you have some written on cane strips, and here you have these collections which are preserved in various monasteries. Now Gautam Buddha had his philosophy, he had his own teachings, he had his own understanding of the world, and these teachings or his understanding of the world or his philosophy, which is called as the Buddhist philosophy today, are found in a text called as Sutta Pitaka. So the first philosophy or the first principle of Gautam Buddha is, he said that world is transient or temporary, and he calls it anishya, means it is constantly changing. Then he says that it is completely soulless, anatha, and there is nothing permanent or eternal in it. The third philosophy of Gautam Buddha was, he says sorrow or dukkha, which we call it in Konkani or even Hindi, is essential for human existence. He says you cannot exist in the world unless and until you have sorrow in your life, because you will not know the importance of happiness, you will realize the importance of happiness only when there is sorrow or dukkha. And finally he says that by following the path of moderation between severe penance and self-indulgence, humans can rise from the worldly troubles. So he says you do not have to perform severe penance or a severe meditation. You follow the path of moderation. You find the right path between severe penance and self-indulgence. Self-indulgence means you do what your mind tells you, you do what your heart tells you, and that will be leading you to good life. So these were the teachings or philosophy of Gautam Buddha. Looking at his teachings or listening to his teachings and reading and going, then there were many people who preached Buddhism. He had many followers, and these followers were called as disciples. Okay, now we have another word for disciples which are called as shishya, but basically these disciples were monks, and they were all teachers of Dhamma. That means they preached Buddhism throughout. And now when these monks came together, they lived in an assembly, and this assembly or this organization was called as the Sangha. Now what they had a certain way of life, they had a certain way of living life. It was not like the usual life which you and I live. Now these monks had to live a simple life by possessing only what is required for survival. I wouldn't use the word living, but survival. So bare minimum requirements were with the monks. Like they had to have just one bowl with them to receive food from the laity, and whatever the laity would give them, whatever the common man would give them, okay, they would live on alms. Okay, so whatever the common man would give them, by this food they had to survive for the whole day. You could not say that, okay, today I have received less from this house, so I'll go to the next house and I'll ask for something more. No. Now also, because they begged for food, they had to live on alms. I would use the word alms. Okay, that is the reason why they were called as bhikkhus. Now initially Gautam Buddha was not in favor of including women in his Sangha. Then after the persuasion of his favorite disciple, he had a very favorite disciple whose name was Ananda. Okay, after the persuasion of Ananda tried to convince him to include women also in the Sangha, and that is how Gautam Buddha decided to include women in his Sangha, and you find the first woman to be ordained as a bhikkhuni, the males were called as bhikkhus and the females were called as bhikkhunis later on, okay, was his own foster mother Mahapajapati Gautami. As you all know that Gautam Buddha, his mother did not survive later on, but he was taken care by another lady whose name is Gautami, and that is how he was called as Gautam Buddha. So this Mahapajapati Gautami was the first bhikkhuni to be ordained as to join the Sangha as a woman. His followers came from various backgrounds. His followers were kings, his followers were wealthy men, his followers were workers, slaves, people who worked with wood, carpenters, and many other ivory workers and so on. But once they came into the Sangha, they had to share their earlier identities. A king, if he wanted to join the Sangha, he had to give up his kingship. He had to live like an ordinary monk. I told you there were two diverse systems of thoughts. One was Buddhism and the other one was Jainism. Now, after having a glance over Buddhism, let me quickly go through the system of thought which also emerged in the same era, that is called as Jainism. Now, he was also called as Vardhaman, okay, Mahavir. He was called as Vardhaman Mahavir, and he was the 24th of the Tirthankar. There were 23 Tirthankars in the lineage. He was the 24th. He also came up with his own philosophy of life, and his philosophy was not same, okay, but very similar to Buddhist philosophy. He emphasized on something called as ahimsa, and that ahimsa remained in the Indian culture till today. Okay, they say that it has come from the Jain philosophy of life. The first philosophy what he preached was, he says all non-living and living things, they have life. He believes that stones, rocks, water has life, and he says you cannot injure any living being, okay, and that is the central focus of Jain philosophy, as I was telling you, ahimsa. So he says the moment you hurt somebody, that means you have done a sin. Then he says the cycle of life and birth is shaped through your karma. We say जन्म ते मरण पर्यंत जे आमी कितें काम करतात, ओके, कर्म करतात, that is going to affect your next generation, म्हणजे next जन्म, I would say. So he believed in that. So he says the cycle of life and birth, he says soul does not die, so it goes, it takes birth, it dies, again the cycle continues, takes birth, dies, again it continues. So what sheds off is the body. So he says that will depend on your karma. Asceticism and penance can free one from the cycle of karma. So he says if you give up all your worldly pleasures, if you give up all your material wealth and perform penance, tapashcharya, then he says only then your soul will be free from the cycle of karma. And for this, performing the penance and becoming an ascetic, म्हणजे ऋषी जावप किंवा साधू जावप, okay, this could be done by renouncing the world, giving up, and for this you have to join monastery or monastic existence is necessary. Then he also asked his followers to take 5 vows, and which were they? Here you can see them on the screen. Okay, first one is abstain from, don't do. These are don'ts. Okay, we sometimes we have do's and don'ts. These are don'ts. Don't kill anybody, don't steal, don't tell lies, observe celibacy, and you cannot possess property. So these were the 5 vows which the monks had to take when they joined the Jain monastic order. How did this Jainism spread? Okay, we have Jain scholars who produced a large amount of wealth and that wealth was in the form of not money, but it was in the form of literature. And as I have told you, just like Buddhism, you find Jainism, this literature in so many languages. You find them in Prakrit, you find them in Sanskrit, Tamil, and these texts are carefully preserved in the library. What you see on the screen is an example of a Jain text. Okay. So this is one way where how it spread, it went from one place to the other, and also through sculptures. Some of the early sculptures of the Jain order, which are produced by the devotees, are found in large numbers in many sites all over India. So here you have sculptures of Jain Tirthankar, which are found in many places in India. As Jainism and Buddhism were progressing, you find new cultural thoughts coming in. You find new architectural styles coming in. As Buddhism went ahead, you find new type of architecture or new type of symbols coming in. And one of the symbol which got associated to Buddhism was a stoop. A stoop is nothing but a mound. You can see on the screen, this is a stoop from Afghanistan, and it is just nothing but a built mound of bricks. And what was so important about this stoop? All the relics which were used or supposed to be used by Gautam Buddha, okay, it could be in the form of his teeth, some gems or coins, whatever, okay, all what had association with Gautam Buddha were buried in these mounds which are called as stoops. And here you see the relics which are in the form of cowrie shells, which are in the form of rings and coins. They were put in such kind of metal containers or caskets and were buried in these stoops. There is one more picture of the relics which are buried here. Okay. So the tradition of stoops, according to archaeologists or historians, they say it is pre-Buddhist. But once it started, they started burying these relics in these mounds, it started getting associated with Buddhism. And since they contained the relics, the entire stoop was now being venerated as a symbol of Buddha. According to the Buddhist text Ashokvadan, okay, Ashoka has distributed portion of Gautam Buddha's relics to every town and ordered a construction of stoop over them. So here you see one stoop from a cave in Maharashtra. You can see the stoop, the round, of course this is built out of, it's carved out of stone, okay. Another stoop from Sanchi, very famous World Heritage Site. This is another stoop, okay. So the relics of Gautam Buddha were buried in such kinds of mounds. This is a stoop from Maharashtra again. Now, we have seen why were they built? How were they built? What was the way in which the stoops were built? There are many inscriptions present on the base of the stoop or pillars near the stoops or at the side of the stoops. They tell us that they were built by donations which are made by kings like Satvahans and other powerful ones. Some of the stoops are built by guild of ivory workers. They built the gateways of the stoop. Okay. Some of them were built by ordinary men and women whose names are mentioned on the railings of the stoop or on the base of the stoop. So this is the way, even right from common man to the rich personality or the royal personality, I would say, the stoops were, they contributed in building the stoops. Bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, whatever they collected from the alms also contributed in building these stoops. Apart from stoops, there were other symbols which also came and became a part of Buddhist culture or Buddhist art, I would say. And early sculptors did not show Gautam Buddha in a human form, but showed him through different symbols. Like you find empty seat, which indicates the meditating Gautam Buddha. Here you see a picture where people are standing around him and they're around a seat, and the seat is completely empty. You can see a pillow here, and this symbol of empty seat meant that Gautam Buddha is meditating. So such kinds of symbols were carved by sculptors to indicate Gautam Buddha's existence. Then we have a stup which represents Mahaparinibbanna, that is Gautam Buddha's last phase of life. So whenever they would carve a stup, that means it is Mahaparinibbanna. You also find a wheel which is shown on many carvings. You can see on the screen there is a wheel and people are praying to it, which shows that he is preaching the first sermon which happened at Sarnath. Okay, so whenever there is a wheel in Buddhist architecture, you have to know that it represents the first sermon at Sarnath. Then we have a tree which is shown in such kinds of art. Okay, so people are praying and there is a tree, and here it means it is a symbol or an event. It is a symbol which shows an event in Gautam Buddha's life. Maybe he is preaching somewhere, or he is meditating, or he has come to a village. So the tree represented an event in his life. So these were the various symbols which slowly came in and became a part of Buddhist art. Now there were also popular traditions which are slowly creeping into Buddhist art. And these sculptures or these popular traditions came in through sculptures, they came in through various art forms, and these sculptures were not directly inspired by Buddhist ideas. One of them is called as Shalabhanjika. Shalabhanjika is nothing but a representation of such kind of beautiful women you can see on the screen. And these women were shown to hold a branch of a tree, clinging onto a branch of a tree. Their touch was supposed to be a boon to the tree. It would be laden with fruits and flowers, and also they were believed to be causing they were like a gift to the tree. Okay, their touch was believed to be very important or very fruitful for the tree. So these Shalabhanjikas, the historians say that they might have crept in from some popular traditions of which were existing during that time. Also you find on the railings of the stup, okay, you find animals which, like elephants, which are significance of strength, might and power. They also became a part. Then monkeys, horses, cattle, all these became a part of Buddhist art. So you have an elephant which signifies strength. Then you have some cattle which is shown. Okay, you have monkeys and birds which are shown. All these became a part of Buddhist art. Then there is one more tradition which also crept in, and there is one woman who is shown, and she is surrounded by lotuses. You can see on the screen there is a woman who is surrounded by lotuses, fully bloomed lotuses, and two elephants sprinkling water on her head, okay, performing an abhishek. She was called as Gajalakshmi, but some also say that she represents Maya, the person who gave birth to Gautam Buddha. So last one is serpent, okay, like the Nag worship we have. This also became a very important part of Gautam Buddha's, Buddhist philosophy, okay, or Buddhist art. So there are many discussions, debates on this, so as to how these popular traditions, which were not a part of actual Buddhism initially, became a part of Buddhist art. And as Buddhism developed, Jainism developed, there was yet one more cultural trend which was coming in, and that was called as Puranic Hinduism, or a culture which was based on the Purans, mythological stories. As Gautam Buddha was portrayed as the savior of the world, okay, this notion of a savior being shown was not only found in Buddhism, but later on it was also depicted in Hinduism. In Hinduism, you find Vishnu being shown as the savior. Okay, he is shown as saving the Mother Earth. He is shown as preserving the culture or preserver of the universe. And people who followed Vishnu or people who followed these beliefs were called as Vaishnavites, and that is why this particular belief was called as Vaishnavism, basically followers of Vishnu. In case of Vaishnavism, 10 avatars were portrayed, or 10 incarnations of Vishnu were portrayed, and these 10 incarnations were believed to save the world whenever it was threatened by destruction or by evil forces. So the first avatar was Matsya avatar, or the fish incarnation, saving the earth from pralaya. Pralaya means calamities. Okay. The next you can see on the screen is the Kurma avatar. The third, we will not go into the details of it. I just want you to see the pictures so that you know what are the 10 avatars of Vishnu. Then you have the Vara avatar saving the earth from again Pralay. Then you have Vaman avatar. You have Narsimha avatar where he takes the form of half man and half lion and kills the demon. You have Parshuram avatar. You have Ram. You have Krishna. You have Buddha, who also became a part of Vaishnava belief, and finally you have the Kalki avatar, or the destroyer of evil forces. Like Vaishnavism, there was another belief which was coming in, and that was called as Shaivism. Shaivism is nothing but worship of Shiva. Initially, they did believe that initially the early Shaiva people only believed in worshipping the Shivalinga. Okay. Later on, you find also sculptures of Shiva being depicted. He was shown in various forms. Shiva with the Nandi, or Shiva with Parvati, who is called as Uma Maheshwar, and many such sculptures came into existence. And these deities or these sculptures were identified by the set of attributes, okay, by the headdresses, by the ornaments, and by the ayuds. Ayud means weapon. Okay, like for example, Vishnu would be identified if he was shown holding a Shankha, Chakra, Gada and a Padma. Okay, Shiva would be identified with a Trishul and with a matted hair, Jata. And you have various other ornaments which are shown. Okay, like the skin around Shiva's waist, or Krishna would be identified by a flute. So here you see in this chapter all diverse system of thoughts which sprang up during the 6th century BCE and went up till the Gupta era.
Prudent Scholars, powered by Lupin Pharmaceuticals.